Hello everyone, Emma Power here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one, I'm going to be taking a look at the rules for the upcoming TCG Disney Lorcana, as well as, several of the upcoming cards that have been revealed so far. So the rules at a glance of Lorcana is that it's basically stuff that we have seen before. It is familiar, yet somewhat repetitive. I think we need more creative TCGs, not less. And if you've played anything like Magic the Gathering or most other TCGs, you should feel right at home with this game. So the being familiar has its ups and downs. Because it's so familiar rules wise, it means that it's pretty easy to pick up. I think learning this game is very straightforward. It also means, if you have like a parent or an older sibling who maybe plays another TCG, then it'll be easy for them to teach, someone younger how to play this game. Because I guess one of the big appealing aspects about this is that they want it to be for kids as well, I guess. So that might explain some of the simplicity in a way. But also, the main aspect of the game is that you need to collect 20 lore, which are those little diamond things on the right-hand side of the card. So if we just see where my mouse is, hopefully my mouse decides to load. There we go. So these four down here, these are essentially lore counters. And whenever you exert, or not exert, I should say, whenever you tap a creature, basically, like in Magic the Gathering, whenever you tap it, you can go on a quest and gain that amount of lore. Now, what is that quest? We don't know. It's kind of just explained to us at face value that whenever you tap a creature, then you get the lore. It's also worth noting that it's not actually whenever you tap a creature, it is literally when you decide to do this once per turn. However, if you do this, then it leaves you open to being challenged by your opponent's creatures, which can then, of course, destroy your creatures. So the rules at a glance. So we have the characters, items, and action cards, which are currently the three types of cards. I'm assuming we'll see something along the lines of like stadium cards, or maybe something like lands, like enchanted lands potentially. But basically, we have characters, which is pretty self-explanatory. Items, which say they stay in play when you play them into play, and they also have like their own abilities. So you could view these as like tool cards or like enchantments from Magic the Gathering, or like tool cards, I guess, from Pokemon. And then the actions, which are like a one-time effect, and then they're discarded. So they're kind of like spells in MTG, and also just like regular items from Pokemon. There's also a separate kind of action called songs, which is basically the exact same thing as an action, but some characters can cast the song for you so you don't have to pay the ink cost. So it just means that the character can essentially pay for the song, and it can be a little bit less. So it'll just be a more efficient way of doing the song. And because, of course, so many Disney films feature so much music, I would expect to see so many songs featured in this TCG. So the game overview, as we mentioned before, winning the game is that your goal is to be the first player to gain 20 or more lore. So if you go past 20 in your turn, then that's fine, you still win. Some card abilities do give you lore, but the most common way to gain it is by playing characters and sending them on quests. So it doesn't say initially here how you do this, but just to recap, when you have a creature in the ready state, which is basically just faced up as normal, what you can do is send it on a quest and tilt it on its side, and then you get the lore points equal to those little diamond things on the bottom right-hand corner. So as we can see here, all these cards have an ink cost. This is just how much the card costs in terms of ink. The inkwell icon is cards with this like sphere and lines around it, this like spiral pattern, I guess, around the cost hexagon, can be put into your inkwell to use as ink. So not all cards can be used this way, but basically once per turn you can play any card into your inkwell to act as ink, and then you can tap that card or just tilt it on its side, and then that will provide you with one ink to pay for creatures. So basically, assuming you didn't use any kind of abilities to cheat it out into play, Mickey Mouse, Wayward Sorcerer, would require you to tap 4 ink in your inkwell pile. So we have to assume that you're not going to get Mickey Mouse out until, like turn 4 at the earliest. So the name, the characters also have a version name listed below the character's name. I think this also means that you can play up to like 4 copies of each different named character, provided they have different text, but I'm not sure about that. Classifications, categories sometimes referred to in card rules, such as broom in this example. So for example, Animate Broom says you may pay 1 ink less to play broom characters, which is a really nice ability to have. And then the ink symbol, which is this, it's very obscure. I kind of wish this had been like much bigger in the top right hand corner or something. but this silly little symbol down here is your ink color, which is basically the overall color of the card. I guess you can tell by the background on the border here how it's all purple. It's a purple card, but that's the ink symbol that you'll need to keep track of because you can only play 1 or 2 inks in your deck. And then, of course, abilities and effects, which are kind of just like the same thing. For example, this says Rush as an example below. This character can challenge the turn they're played, which is basically just like haste from Magic the Gathering. So just parts of the card continued. The different ink keys we have are Amber, which is the yellow color, Emerald, which is green, Sapphire, which is blue, Purple for Amethyst, Ruby for red, and then Steel for metal or silver types. So only on characters also have Strength, Willpower, and Lore value. So Strength is kind of like this almost sun-like symbol for strength. I think they should have picked a sword for this, honestly, but it's a sun, I guess. How much damage your character deals during a challenge. And then Willpower is how much damage it takes to banish the creature from play. So this shield is actually your health pool, basically. So when the character loses all of this, they die, effectively. So the lore value is how much lore you gain when the character goes on a quest. So when you decide to tap Mickey Mouse to go on a quest, that's what you'll get. And of course, you need 20 of those to win the game. So that's important to bear in mind. There is also a rarity key on here. So this will be for like different rarities and pack pulls. Hopefully this means we'll get like super rare artworks and stuff. That'd be really cool to see. So we have common, uncommon, rare, super rare, and legendary. So for setting up, each player needs their own deck, and they will set your lore tracker to 0. They'll draw 7 cards for their starting hand. So yep, pretty big starting hands, nice to see. You can alter your starting hand if you choose. So basically, altering your starting hand is basically you get to take your hand, shuffle it back into your deck, and redraw 7. And you can do that once per game at the start. So it's essentially like taking a free mulligan in Magic the Gathering. I know some other TCGs offer this as well. I don't think Pokemon does. No, Pokemon doesn't. What am I saying? Pokemon doesn't need to because it has to rely on basics to start the game. But basically in this game, if you really don't like your opening hand, you can take it, shuffle it back into your deck, and then draw 7 different cards. Also, you determine the first player by flipping a coin, rolling a dice, or so on. So, roll the dice, see if you get heads, or flip a coin, heads or tails. So actually playing the game is divided into 2 parts. Each player takes the whole turn before passing the turn to the next player. On your turn, you take these steps in order. So the beginning phase is ready. Ready your exerted creatures by turning them upright. So if you've put characters on a quest line or they've had to be exerted for abilities, then you put them in the ready position. And it says over here that like the ready position is face up and exerted is just when they're basically tilted on their side. It's a little bit easier to remember in Magic the Gathering because it's just called tapped. But exerted is, one way of saying it, I guess. Then you also have set, which is the second phase. Check for effects that happen at the start of your turn and follow their instructions. So if something says at the beginning of your turn, this is when you do it. Then step 3 of the beginning phase is draw. Draw a card from the top of your deck. The player going first skips this step on their first turn. So another rule from Magic the Gathering. I really like this one. It means, the player going first doesn't start with 8 cards, but they still have some sort of advantage over the player going second. So the main phase says once per turn, you can put a card face down in your inkwell at any time. So basically, when it's in the inkwell, it can't be used again. It's basically gone forever, but it does provide you with 1 ink, which will be used to cast creatures. Additionally, you can take any actions listed below any number of times in any order you want. This allows you to take full advantage of what your cards can do in combination with other effects. So these could be play a card, use a character ability, it doesn't require them to exert, use an item ability, take an action with a character that's been in play since the start of your turn. These include questing, challenge an opponent's exerted character, or use an ability that requires them to exert. So as you may have picked up by now, when you send a character on a quest, you have to exert it. So even though you'll get lore for doing that, it basically opens the card up to being attacked or challenged by an opponent's creature. So for example, if you have a creature that has a very high lore cost but a very low health cost, basically means that you kind of have this risk where you can get the lore, but your opponent can just come in there with a big attack and KO your creature. So that's kind of the decision making around this game is choosing when to get the lore and when to hold off and try and challenge your opponent's creatures after they've exerted. So, what are ready and exerted cards? Just to recap, some game rules and card effects require you to exert a card in play, which just means to turn it over on its side. Once a card is exerted, you can't exert a card again until it's been readied by a game rule or card effect. To ready a card, simply turn it back upright. Remember to ready all your exerted cards at the beginning of your turn. So your inkwell, this is like a separate card pile. Your inkwell is where you put your ink cards, face down. You'll use these cards in your inkwell to pay the cost of cards you play from your hand. You may put a card from your hand in the inkwell once each turn. So we have to assume for the time being, unless I'm guessing there'll be cards in the future that allow you to accelerate more than one inkwell a turn, I hope. But basically, as it stands, you can place one card from your hand as an inkwell. So it means that cards that cost like 6 or 7 ink, you can only play them until like turn 6 or 7 or beyond. So, bear that in mind when you're creating a deck. So this card you choose must have the inkwell icon around its cost in the upper left corner. The more ink cards you have, the more you will be able to do. So to put a card in your inkwell, show the card to your opponent and then put it face down the inkwell's ink. So you do have to show your opponent which card you're choosing. Every card in your inkwell presents 1 ink, no matter what's on the front. Choose wisely. Cards put in your inkwell stay there for the rest of the game. So there's no getting them back, so wise decisions here. Once you put a card in your inkwell, nothing on the front matters, including its cost and ink type. It is simply ink. So no matter what color you use, I know you can only play like 2 colors in your deck, but you could put like all the red cards in your ink pile and it could still pay for your purple ones, if that makes sense. So playing a card just means taking it from your hand and putting it face up on the table. Each card has an ink cost in a hexagon in the upper left corner. To play the card, you must exert that many cards in your inkwell. So what that means is if you have a card that costs 4 ink and you have 5 ink cards in the inkwell, then you just tilt 4 of those ink on their side and then you can pay for the creature. It also means that you have 1 inkwell remaining. I say 1 inkwell, just 1 ink in the well. I know it's weird terminology. You can then play that card as well in order to cast a creature, I should say, that costs 1 ink or less. So in theory, this just allows you to cast more and more creatures the more and more ink you have in the inkwell. Just of course, bear in mind that anything that goes into this pile, you'll never see again. So when you play a character card, put it on the table, and I think we just read that, didn't we? Yeah, we just did. Characters enter play in the ready position, but you can't do anything with them until your next turn. So this kind of like leaves them vulnerable to attack. It's kind of like the summoning sickness effect for Magic the Gathering, where cards can't do anything for a whole turn. And you need to wait for their ink to dry, so to speak. I don't understand how any of this is like related to themes, lore, whatever, but I'm assuming they will have a story or something. When you play an item card, put it onto the table above your inkwell. Unlike characters, you can use items right away. So this effectively means that items that have their own abilities, you can use those abilities the turn you play the item as well. So that's fun to mention. When you play an action card, do what the card tells you to do, then put the card in your discard pile. Always put cards into your discard pile face up so everyone can see them. So it's basically just like discarding a card in any other TCG. So songs are a kind of action card, but there's a special rule that gives you another way to pay for them. Each song says a character with cost X or more can exert to sing the song for free. If you have a character with listed cost or higher, you can exert that character to play the song card instead of exerting cards in your inkwell to do it. It's a lot of terminology, but it will make sense. Using this approach still counts as playing the card. Rules for when you exert a character still apply, of course, so characters can't sing songs the same turn they come into play. So you do have to wait a turn for that card to be able to help you cast song spells. So now for the kind of important bit, questing and challenging. So to quest with one of your characters, exert them and gain lore equal to their lore value, which is that little diamond thing. Remember, you can't quest with a character the same turn you play them, so you do have to wait a whole turn for this. Challenging, questing is how you win the game, but sometimes you need to slow your opponents down and basically take out all their creatures from preventing the opponent from doing their own questing. This is where challenging comes in. First, exert one of your characters and send them into the challenge. So this is important to bear in mind initially because it means that even though you might want to challenge one of your opponent's exerted creatures because they're getting lore, it also means you exert your own creature. So when it goes into your opponent's turn, they can challenge your exerted creature that you were using to challenge theirs. So that's something important to bear in mind. So you can't challenge a ready character, it has to be an exerted character. Both characters in a challenge deal damage equal to each other at the same time. Look at each character's strength and put that many damage counters on the other character. Characters damage each other's in a challenge. Characters damage each other in challenges, there we go. And some card effects deal damages as well. Whatever the source, damage counters stay on a character until an effect removes them or the character is banished. So this idea of damage counters is pretty cool because it means there'll be like healing cards potentially and stuff that says like remove damage counters. So that's always nice to see. And a character is banished when they have damage counters on them that reach to exceed their willpower. Put that character from the player's discard pile, from play into the discard pile, I should say. Making loads of mistakes today, it's terrible. But basically, if a character has 4 health, you deplete that health, they go to the discard pile. That's all you really need to know. So example challenge, I think this is a really good example actually, is Captain Hook, captain of a Jolly Roger, is challenging Donald Duck, boisterous fowl. Captain Hook has 3 strength and Donald Duck has 2 strength. At the same time, Captain Hook deals 3 damage to Donald Duck, who gets 3 damage counters. Donald deals 2 damage to Hook in return, who gets 2 damage counters. With only 3 willpower, Donald is in trouble because his damage is equal or greater to than his willpower. He is banished and goes to the player's discard pile. Hook wins the challenge. However, he needs to watch out though, as his own health is 4, and if he takes 2 more damage later, he will be banished. So Hook took 2 damage from Donald and now has 2 damage counters on him, and only 2 health remaining effectively. Donald is KO'd by Captain Hook. So using abilities, many items and characters have abilities you can use during your turn, and only during your turn. These normally affect other cards in play. Cards in a player's deck, discard, hand, or inkwell aren't in play, so they aren't affected by other cards unless the card says otherwise. If a card ability has a cost that appears before its effect, with the 2 separated by a dash. The cost might include an exert cost and an ink cost text that explains the cost, or a combination of any of these. You must pay every part of an ability's cost in order to play the ability. Very straightforward stuff. Basically read what it says and do it. A character with a particular ability can't be granted that ability again. I'm going to be quite frank with you guys, I have no clue what that sentence means. A character with a particular ability can't be granted that ability again. I have no clue what that means. No clue. If someone could help me out, please do. Remember, you can't use abilities of a character you played this turn. So this is kind of a once per turn kind of abilities rules. Example, Beastmare has the ability Show Me, which means exert and pay 3 ink. If you have no cards in your hand, draw a card. Because the mirror is an item, you can even play this ability at the same turn you play the card. So that's a cool thing about items, is that they come with their own abilities. So you can play the item and then use the ability on the same turn, but you can't do that during with your characters when you play them down. So with ending the game, the first player to reach 20 lore or more wins. If your deck runs out of cards, you lose the next time you would have to draw a card. So mill will likely be a strategy at some point in this TCG. So with multiplayer games, that is an option. Lorcana is a fun 2-player game, but there's nothing stopping you from playing with 3 or more players, which is pretty fun usually. You know, like multiplayer Magic the Gathering especially is really fun. Multiplayer Pokemon can get a bit hectic, but you know, still a fun time regardless. The game rules remain the same, except at the end of the player's turn, the player to the left takes the next turn. Whenever an ability requires more than one player to do something at the same time, start with the player whose turn it is then proceed to the left until each affected player has done their action. And then we have here building a deck. Making your own deck is part of the fun of Lorcana. You get to choose which characters you want, which abilities to include, and the strategies you want to employ. There are 2 ways to approach deck building. The easiest is to switch out cards of an existing deck, like one of the ready-to-play starter theme decks, and you can also build a new deck from scratch using the cards in your collection. This method is more work, but it can be a lot more fun, but it is more work because you're not buying our product. Each Lorcana deck must follow these rules, however. Your deck must have at least 60 cards in it. Your deck can't contain more than 4 copies of any single card. However, different versions of a character count as a different card, so having 4 copies of Elsa Snow Queen in your deck doesn't keep you from adding 4 copies of Elsa Queen Regent in your deck, so do bear that in mind. Your deck can only contain cards from 1 or 2 inks, so this is very much a monotype or dual type kind of format. And be sure to check out DisneyLorcana.com for videos with deck building and strategy tips. I don't know why I mentioned that, but I did, so there we go. So this is just a very quick recap of the turn order at a glance. The beginning phase is ready, where you ready all your cards. The set phase is you start of the effects of turn effects happen. The draw is just where you draw a card. The main phase is where you choose as many of these actions as you like during your turn, and you just play them in any order. So I just thought I'd quickly go over some of the characters and the cards that were revealed. We have Captain Hook, Maleficent, and Cruella de Vil on this page. Captain Hook is a steel type, a Dreamborn villain pirate captain. Captain Hook, forceful duelist. So an awful lot of text. I'm assuming all of that will matter at some point in the future. But the cool thing to note about Captain Hook is that he costs only 1 ink to play, so he is very cheap. He has 1 attack and 2 health, and it has the ability Challenger that says +2, when challenging, this character gets +2 attack, so you can become a 3 attack, 2 health. He also gives you 1 point of lore whenever you exert him to go on a quest. So not terrible, but certainly Challenger is just super useful. So being able to give yourself 3 attack when challenging, Hook is obviously designed to be a bit of a quick attacker, basically. You know, he's designed to get in there quickly. Maleficent, on the other hand, costs an absolutely whopping 9 ink to play. So you won't be seeing this card until at least turn 9 or turn 10 at the earliest, I don't think. But the payoff is a 7 attack, so you're basically carrying anything else. 5 willpower, so an awful lot of health to boost. And the amazing ability Dragonfire that says when you play this character, you may banish chosen opposing character. So it's basically just an instant KO when it drops onto the board. Also, you get 2 lore points when you exert it, but I think everyone knows that Maleficent is here for that high attack and high damage. Then we have Cruella de Vil, a miserable as usual villain, with 1 attack, 3 health, and an ink cost of 2. Has the ability You'll Be Sorry that says when this character is challenged and banished, you may return chosen character to their player's hand. So effectively just means you're forcing your opponent to repay for that card. So you could choose a Maleficent, for example, and then force your opponent on the following turn to spend another 9 ink if they want to get that card back into play. So it's just a really annoying bouncing effect. You've seen it a lot in other TCGs. I think there's like entire archetypes built around it in the One Piece TCG. And of course, it's frequent in Magic the Gathering as well. You also get 1 lore counter just from exerting and sending Cruella de Vil on a quest. So very quickly, just go over some more interesting ones. We have Robin Hood, 6 ink for a 4/4, pretty decent. Has 2 abilities, Feed the Poor. Says when you play this character, if an opponent has more cards in their hand than you, draw a card. And then Good Shot says during your turn, this character has evasive. And your opponent can only... Evasive characters, I think, can only be challenged by characters with evasive. So effectively, with Good Shot, it means that when you send Robin Hood on a quest to gain 2 points of lore, it means the opponent has to have a card with evasive in order to challenge Robin Hood. So effectively, as soon as you get this guy down, you can just get 2 points of lore every single turn until the opponent has found a creature with evasive. We also have Elsa over here with the ability Freeze, exert chosen opposing character. So basically sets up one of your opponent's creatures for an ambush. Definitely a cool trap card. Means that you can turn a creature into exerted, allowing you to challenge that creature with one of your own more powerful creatures. We also see Stitch over here, which has some very interesting text on it. Shift 4 says you may pay 4 ink to play this on top of one of your Stitch characters. So you can just kind of like convert another Stitch into this Stitch. And it has the ability Adoring Fans. Whenever you play a character with 2 cost or less, you may exert it to draw a card. So the plus side is that you get to draw a card. That's really cool. However, whenever you play a character with 2 or less, you have to exert it. So it means that creatures with a low cost value of 2 or less are less vulnerable to being attacked by your opponent's next turn. Because if you remember, when you play a card usually from your hand, it's not exerted, it's just put in the ready position. So it can't actually be targeted by your opponent's creatures. However, with Adoring Fans, it does mean it will be tapped, so your opponent can challenge it on their turn if that's important. So yeah, pretty interesting card overall, and also gets you 3 points of lore when you send it on a quest. So we have Aurora, Ganta, and Tinkerbell. Aurora has a 3/5 stat for 5 ink, has the effect Shift again, this time only for 3 ink, and allows you to put it on top of one of your other Aurora. Has the ability Protective Embrace, your other characters gain ward. Opponents can't choose them except to challenge. So we have to assume that with like abilities and stuff and actions, there will be, like we saw one earlier in the video, Banish, that could destroy a creature. So Protective Embrace just means that your opponent can't do anything like that unless they challenge you directly. Then we have Gantu, which has the effect under arrest. Characters with a cost of 2 or less can't challenge your characters. So you basically just, in the late game, you can play this for an 8 ink, and then your opponents just can't do anything to you if they have cost 2 or less. So it basically means that you can exert your creatures for lore stuff as much as you want without having to worry about those small creatures attacking you. We also have Tinkerbell, which is somewhat of a little draw engine, has the ability Battle Plans, that allows you to exert Tinkerbell. You get to draw a card, then choose a card and discard a card. So choose and discard the same card. So effectively means that you have a choice with Tinkerbell every turn. You could send her on a lore quest to get a point of lore, or you could just exert her to draw a card and then choose another card from your hand and discard it. So seems pretty decent, nice way of drawing cards in a metal deck. Then we have Scar and Olaf. Olaf, unfortunately, does not have any like ability text or anything. Doesn't even have any lore counter revealed, so we have to assume he will get some eventually. But if not, Olaf is purely going to be fuel for the Inkwell, which seems really macabre when you say it out loud. But if he doesn't give up any lore points, I know the icon on the Ravensburg logo is covering it, but potentially if he gives up no lore, then Olaf is just going to be fuel for the Inkwell. So yeah, kind of dark in that sense. But Scar has the ability Insidious Plot that says when you play this character, chosen opposing character gets -5 attack this turn, which is wild. That's very wild. So if your opponent only has one creature in play, what you can do is exert another creature to go on a lore quest, play Scar, and thus your opponent's only creature in play does 5 less power. So, never mind, actually scratch that. So when you play this character, chosen opposing creature gets -5 power this turn. So it just means that, whenever you challenge a creature, it means that they can't really retaliate. That's kind of what Scar means. My bad. So then we have Healing Glow, which is an action. It says remove up to 2 damage counters on chosen character. Very handily. We have Jumbo Jakibo, 4/5, no flavor text. Magic Mirror, exert, pay 4, draw a card. Decent, to be honest. White Rabbit's Pocket Watch, exert, pay 1 ink. Chosen character gains Rush, which is basically haste, means they can attack immediately. We have Aladdin, which has Ward, so you can't choose a character except to challenge it. We also have Hades, which isn't fully revealed, but I think has a Shift 6 effect, so you can pay a whopping 6 ink to pay it on top of another Hades. And then Sinister Plot, we don't have the full wording for yet, but I would assume this says this character gets +1 power, I would say, for each other villain character you control, or something like that. Maybe it's -1, but I think +1 might make more sense, but we'll have to wait and see for Hades. We also have Cheshire Cat with Lose Something. When this character is challenged and banished, banish the challenging character. And there is no lore stated. So, interesting card. It doesn't have any power to start with and 3 health. So basically just means that you could, in theory, just use this for abilities that say exerts one of your creatures to do other stuff. So if you have abilities like that, Cheshire Cat could be really good because you know your opponent won't ever want to challenge Cheshire Cat for fear of losing a creature. We also have Maurice with Give It a Try and It Works. Give It a Try says whenever this character requests, you pay 2 ink less for the next item you play this turn. And then It Works says whenever you play an item, you may something. We assume, I think that just means you may draw cards. So pretty good, honestly, an item heavy deck. Like Maurice seems decent, especially with that 7 health. Obviously 2 power is super weak for a 6 ink cost, but definitely for some kind of like item kind of based deck, I suppose. So Maurice is pretty cool. We also have Goofy and Lady Tremaine, I believe her name is. Goofy has 3/4 for a 5, which is decent. Has the effect Evasive. Only characters with Evasive can challenge this character. Really strong effect. Basically means you can just exert Goofy as much as you want without the risk of your opponent ever challenging him. We also have Lady Tremaine, which has the effect Do It Again, which says when you play this character, you may return an action card from your discard pile to your hand. Wow. Okay, so that's an incredible effect. It's kind of like, those effects in Pokemon like Via Seeker or Eldegoss, maybe? those kind of effects, just being able to recover anything from a discard pile is usually pretty good, especially if it's an action card. So being able to recycle them is pretty decent. It is a 1/5 for a 6 ink, but still seems like a pretty good card. But yeah, that's actually the end of the reveals. So unfortunately, we didn't get Milan fully revealed. The flavor text is something along the lines of, during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character, something in a, I think that says in a challenge, your other character something this turn. So unfortunately, we don't have the full flavor text for Milan Imperial Soldier. But yeah, thank you for watching. It's been Our Power. Let me know what you think about Disney Lorcana TCG down below. And yeah, thank you for watching.